Imagine your dog looks at you today and somehow knows this will be the last time, the last walk, the last meal, the last time it hears your voice. Would it understand what is happening, or would it simply live that day like every other? No different, no heavier, no goodbye. Humans know they will die someday. That knowledge shapes almost everything we do, whether we notice it or not. The choices, the fears, the way we love people, knowing we will lose them. But what about the billions of animals sharing this planet with us? The dog asleep at your feet right now. The elephant standing over the bones of her mother. The octopus guarding eggs she will never see hatch. Do they fear death? Do they anticipate it? Or do they have no concept of it at all? What the evidence actually shows is stranger than any of those three answers. For most of the last century, science gave you a confident answer. No, animals live entirely in the present. No future, no past, no mortality, just instinct reacting to whatever is happening right now. This was not a guess. It was the working assumption behind decades of behavioral research. Animals could fear an immediate threat, a predator, a loud noise, a raised hand, but fearing death itself required something else. An abstract concept of your own ending, projected into a future you have never seen. And that, researchers believed, required language. It required the kind of mind that narrates its own story to itself. Your mind does this constantly. You are doing it right now, reading this sentence, aware that you exist, and that one day you will not. For decades, no one believed an animal could hold that same awareness. Then researchers started watching elephants more closely, and the assumption began to crack. In Amboseli National Park in Kenya, researchers have spent decades observing elephant herds. What they documented around elephant death does not look like instinct reacting to a threat. When a herd encounters the body of a dead elephant, they slow down. They go quiet. They approach the body directly, which is unusual behavior around any other carcass. They touch it, with their trunks, along the skull, the tusks, the legs. Some elephants return to the same site days later. Some return months later, to touch the same bones again. Researcher Cynthia Moss, who has studied Amboseli's elephants for over 40 years, has documented this behavior repeatedly across multiple herds and multiple deaths. It is not feeding behavior. It is not territorial behavior. It is not mating behavior. There is no clear survival function that explains it. Elephants have also been observed covering dead bodies with branches and soil, standing guard near a body for hours. Some researchers have described elephants appearing distressed, with drooping ears and lowered heads, near a dead companion. None of this proves an elephant understands death the way you do. But something is clearly registering as significant to them. Something beyond a simple absence of movement. Now think about your own dog for a moment, or your cat, if that is the animal in your life. You have probably heard the phrase before, "It went off to die." People say this when an aging pet disappears in its final hours, finds a closet, a space under a bed, somewhere quiet, apart from the rest of the household. We say this so casually that we forget how strange the claim actually is. Because to go somewhere in order to die requires knowing that you are dying. Veterinarians have documented this withdrawal behavior extensively, particularly in cats. It is sometimes linked to an evolved survival instinct. In the wild, a visibly weak or dying animal is a target. Hiding may simply be an ancient predator avoidance reflex, triggered by the body's own decline, not a conscious decision about death at all. That explanation is plausible. It may even be the correct one. But it does not fully explain everything researchers have observed. In hospice care studies involving dogs, some animals show changes in social behavior in their final days, seeking more contact with their owners, or in other documented cases, seeking less. A measurable shift, not random noise. If your dog were in its final days right now, would you be able to tell? Would you notice the shift before it became obvious? Most owners say, looking back, that they did notice something. They just did not have a name for what they were seeing. Now consider an animal further from anything resembling a pet. An octopus. The female of several octopus species lays a clutch of eggs and then guards them, without eating, for weeks, sometimes months. During this period, her body begins to deteriorate in a precise and almost scheduled way. Skin sloughing, tissue breaking down, a visible, programmed decline. She dies shortly after the eggs hatch. Researchers call this senescence. and it appears to be hormonally triggered, not a behavioral choice. There is strong evidence this is biological programming, not awareness. Her optic gland essentially issues an internal countdown that her body follows regardless of her external circumstances. She is not choosing to die guarding her eggs. Her biology is executing a sequence that ends that way. This case matters because it shows you the opposite end of the spectrum. A behavior that looks devoted, even noble, but maps onto pure mechanism. No anticipation required, no concept of an ending, just a hormonal clock running its course. Which raises an uncomfortable question for everything else in this video. How do you tell the difference between an elephant that understands loss and a body simply running out the same kind of automatic sequence? Between a cat hiding from instinct and a cat that somehow senses what is coming? Chimpanzees offer one of the clearest windows into this question. In multiple documented cases, primatologists have observed chimpanzees attending to dying group members, touching them gently, grooming them, even when grooming offers no apparent benefit, watching their breathing slow, sometimes for hours, without moving away. In one widely cited case from a sanctuary in the Netherlands, an elderly chimpanzee named Mama was visited by John van Hoff, a researcher who had known her for decades. She was unresponsive, near death. When he stroked her head and spoke to her, she opened her eyes, recognized him, and reached out to touch his face and hair, a gesture the chimpanzee community uses to express affection and recognition. The footage of this moment has been viewed by millions, not because it definitively answers whether Mama understood death, but because every person who watches it recognizes something immediately familiar in it. After a chimpanzee dies, others in the group sometimes avoid the area for a period afterward. Mothers have been documented carrying the bodies of dead infants for days, sometimes longer, before finally letting go. This behavior is also seen in other primates and in some cetaceans. Researchers studying grief-like behavior in animals call this a research area still very much in progress. Because here is the wall every single study eventually runs into. You cannot ask an elephant what she is thinking. You cannot ask a chimpanzee whether it understands the difference between sleep and the end of everything. You can only observe behavior. And behavior, however strange or moving, does not directly show you the inside of a mind. This is the same limitation philosophers describe when they ask what it is like to be a bat. You cannot fully access another creature's subjective experience, even with perfect behavioral data. So scientists have looked for an indirect path into the question: self-recognition, specifically the mirror test. An animal is marked somewhere it cannot normally see, then shown a mirror. If it touches or investigates the mark, recognizing the reflection as itself, researchers consider this evidence of self-awareness. A small number of species reliably pass this test. Elephants, great apes, including chimpanzees, dolphins, even Eurasian magpies, a corvid relative of the crows you have already learned, can recognize faces and hold grudges for years. The logic researchers are exploring is this: if an animal has a working concept of self distinct from the rest of the world, it may be more cognitively equipped to have some concept of that self ending. This is not proof. It is a correlation researchers are still investigating carefully. But notice something. Every species that reliably passes the mirror test is also a species with documented death-related behavior that has unsettled researchers. Elephants touching bones, chimpanzees grieving, dolphins supporting dead calves at the surface for days, refusing to let them sink. This does not prove these animals know they will die, but it suggests the animals most likely to have any form of self-concept are also the animals behaving in ways that look, uncomfortably, like grief. Here is where you need to sit with some honesty. Much of what looks like death awareness in animals could be something simpler: pain detection, illness detection, a decline in the smell, sound, or movement of a companion, triggering a behavioral response that has nothing to do with mortality as a concept. Animals are exquisitely good at detecting changes in other animals. That alone could explain most of what you have just watched. Scientists who study this field are deeply divided. Some believe death awareness exists on a spectrum, varying by species and even by individual. Others believe almost everything observed can be explained without invoking any concept of mortality at all. Both groups are looking at the exact same data. which tells you something important about where this field actually stands. Now, go back to your dog, the one from the very beginning of this video. Imagine, again, that today was its last day. Based on everything you have just learned, here is the honest answer to whether it would know. It would not know the way you know. It would not lie awake the night before, turning the thought over the way a human might. There is no evidence of that kind of narrated, future-projecting fear in a dog's mind. But it might withdraw. It might seek you out more, or seek solitude, depending on the animal and the moment. Its body might already be responding to changes you cannot perceive yet. Something would likely be happening. Just not the version of dread you imagined when this video began. And maybe that is the more important discovery here. Maybe the question was never really whether animals fear death exactly the way you do. Maybe it is whether death needs to be feared the same way to still matter to a mind. A mind that does not narrate its own future may still register loss, may still respond to absence, may still return, again and again, to the place where something it loved used to be. That is not nothing. It may, in some ways, be purer than human grief, unclouded by the specific dread of your own personal ending. Just the raw fact of absence, felt completely, without a story wrapped around it. So, the next time your dog looks at you, you will not know if it understands what death is. Neither does the entire field of animal cognition, not with certainty. But you now know it is not living in pure ignorance either. Something registers, something responds, something in its own way that none of us can fully measure yet. Elephants will keep returning to bones. Octopuses will keep guarding eggs they never see hatch. Chimpanzees will keep reaching out to touch a face they recognize, even at the very end. And dogs across the world will keep doing what they have always done, living entirely inside the day they are given, not because they cannot grasp anything larger, but because, perhaps, that has never been the point of their kind of mind. You spend a measurable portion of your life thinking about your own ending, planning around it, fearing it, writing about it, even now, in a video like this one. Your dog spends none of its life that way. It spends all of it here, with you, in this exact moment, whichever moment that happens to be. Maybe that is not a limitation. Maybe, when you really look at it, it is the single most honest way of existing that anything on this planet has ever managed. We do not know, with certainty, whether animals know they are going to die. We may never know, with certainty. The minds involved are too different from ours, and too closed off from direct access, to settle the question completely. What we do know is that the old answer, the confident no from a century of textbooks, is no longer good enough. The elephants made sure of that. The chimpanzees made sure of that. The quiet, withdrawing cat under your own bed may have made sure of that too. So look at your dog again, right now, if it is nearby. It does not know this is a video about death. It does not know what tomorrow holds, the way you constantly do. It only knows this moment, completely, without reservation, without the specific fear you carry every day, whether you notice it or not. Perhaps the most honest thing you can take from all of this is not an answer about what animals know. It is a question about what you have been missing by knowing too much for too long about an ending none of us can ever fully picture. Your dog will never read this sentence. It will never need to. It already understands something you spend your whole life trying to make peace with. How to be entirely, completely present. For exactly as long as it gets. And maybe, when its last day actually comes, that will be enough. Not because it understood the ending, but because it never once stopped living inside the moment you were both still sharing.